with you all.
And with your spirit.
The reading of the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
At that time, a man came to Jesus, kneeling down and saying unto him, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a dumb spirit, and wherever it seizeth him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And Jesus answered him, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell onto the ground and rolled about, foaming in his mouth. And Jesus asked the father, How long has he had this? And he said, From childhood, and it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, If you believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd was running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, You dumb and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him, and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when Jesus had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could we not cast it out? And Jesus said to him, This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer and fasting. They went out from there and passed through Galilee, and Jesus would not have anyone know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, The Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise on the third day.
Glory to you, O Lord. Glory to you. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you.
Please be seated. So I'm going to pass around the icon of the ladder of divine ascent, and so everybody can see it. The one thing today that we celebrate is a man whose name was John Climicus. They named him Climicus because it means the ladder. And he wrote a very famous book that is known throughout the Orthodox and the Catholic world that talks about a divine ascent, the ladder of divine ascent. The first few weeks as we prepare for Holy Week and we prepare for Great Lent, our journey to get here, the fourth Sunday of Great Lent, is quite a few Sundays that deal with forgiveness and mercy of God. And then we deal with the Last Judgment, we deal with Forgiveness Sunday, we deal with the triumph of orthodoxy, we deal with the cross. We deal with all of these different things all the way up. And on the second Sunday, we deal with St. Palamas, St. Gregory Palamas, I apologize. But today we deal with, on the fourth Sunday, St. John of the Ladder. Now the thing about ladders is they are a very, very useful tool. In order to have the ladder, in order to use it to its best potential, first of all, you got to make sure, and I've seen accidents happen, you got to make sure that the grounding is secure. You can't put it in mud, you can't put it in a pool of water where there's possibly electricity. You got to make sure that it goes into a place where it seems secure. And depending on the job, there's some places that you just can't reach without a ladder. We can't get up to the roof of this place unless you're like Spider-Man, right? Crawls up the side of the building, but I don't think most of us have that ability. But you need a ladder. So depending on the job, depending on what you need, you have to have a ladder in order to progress where you need to go. Of course, we get a prefigurement, a foreshadowing of the ladder when we see in the Old Testament, right? Jacob, he has this vision. And this vision, he sees the ladder going all the way up into heaven and the angels ascending and descending upon it. That ladder is a representation of Jesus Christ. That ladder is how we are able to get to God the Father. Now, as you're looking at that icon that's going around, you can see the person that wrote the icon. He understands what St. John was trying to get across. Now, this past week I met with a friend of mine, and he said that this Lent he decided he was going to read the ladder beside his head. And he said, as I'm reading it, it seems like the ladder is very cold. Right? The book itself is very cold. And I said to him, yeah, because it was technically written for individuals that were in the monastery. But if you look at a ladder by itself, right, it is very cold. Without anything near it, it's just a ladder. But you have to make a decision, right? You have to make a decision. Jesus Christ is our way to get to the Father. Jesus is our way to get into heaven. There's only one way to get it. And sometimes we have to fight through many things in order to get to Christ. I call to mind like the woman who had the flow of blood for all those years, right? She actually had to get on her hands and knees in order to get just to the fringe of Jesus' clothes. She had to fight through those people. Now you got to remember, as time is progressing, right? Jesus is now, I'm using the word, more popular, right? The people are starting to see him. The people are starting to witness him. The people have seen miracles now, right? Many miracles happened while Jesus was here, right? And he couldn't go barely anywhere without somebody recognizing him. So there was a twofold thing. People that didn't really care, right? They just ran up to Jesus and they were like, please have mercy on me. But there were certain people that were part of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that they had to actually think twice. Should I actually go up to Jesus and ask for this mercy? And now you have to get to your mind. You have to get into your mind, what is the most important thing? Right? The supposed father, the Greek father, Hippocrates, right? He wrote, in order for us to get well, we have to remove the thing that makes us sick. Makes sense. If we are getting sick from something, we need to remove it from our lives. Well, whatever it is, right? We have St. John Climicus that talks about these things. He talks about 30 steps that get to heaven, right? Of course, these 30 steps, sometimes people can go past many of them all at one time because it's not really a problem for them. But sometimes people get stuck on certain things. Now, the interesting thing is the first step of the ladder of divine ascent, the first one that you get to is actually renouncing the world. And lo and behold, I would safely say that probably most people can't even step foot under the first rung of the ladder. Most people can't even step foot there where it's the renouncing of the world. The first 3 steps actually are talking about those things, that we have to give up the things that burden us. And then the next few steps, going up, deal with things that we deal with spiritually and physically, right? Our pride, our anger, our lusts. And then it deals with gluttony, with fury, and all these things. As you're progressing forward, the middle of the list is one step after the other. But the key to the ladder is actually taking the first step. It's actually taking the first step. You have to go to the ladder and actually accept that the ladder is willing to take you to where you want to go. And it's sometimes one of the most challenging things that any Christian can do. Notice I said it wasn't an atheist, it wasn't a Satanist, it's a Christian. Because most times, we who are Christians, we have the hardest time taking the first steps to where we need to be. And at the very top of the ladder, right? At the very pinnacle of the ladder is where we want to go. That is where Christ abides. That is where Christ is. That is our goal. That is the pinnacle of our very being here in this world. Now, many of us, like I said, look at the ladder, look at that book, right? We look at the words that St. John Climicus wrote, and it's hard. And I'm going to say, it is hard. It is very hard, but not impossible, right? Jesus himself says, anything is possible when you believe. Anything. When Jesus uses words like anything, he means it. Jesus doesn't beat around the bush when it comes to our salvation. Now, this particular day, when Jesus is walking through the people, right? He encounters a man whose child is demon-possessed. This man, you got to know, had heard already that Jesus was coming, and there was a little bit of fear maybe in the back of his mind. Right? There's a little bit of fear in the back of his mind. Because Jesus is already warning his disciples, it's coming. I'm warning you right now. There's going to be the time where I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to be taken away. You're not going to have me in your presence, and I'm going to be crucified. Jesus is warning the disciples. And the disciples are going, what is he talking about? What? It's going to be taken away. You're bad. How can this be happening? Right? But this man, he encounters Jesus. And it doesn't really matter what anybody says, because his son's life is on the line. His son's life is on the line. And he goes to Jesus and he says, if you can. And Jesus says, if you believe, anything is possible. Now, one of my favorite prayers that I know that I have gone before my Lord many, many times and said, I believe, help me with my unbelief. I believe, help me with my unbelief. This is a powerful prayer. Because there's many times where I encounter different things in my life and I need God to help me with that unbelief. I need God to help me with that unbelief just so I can get to the first step of that ladder of divine ascent. Just so I can get there. And Jesus says, if you believe. Right? Because this boy was being thrown into the water and thrown into the fire. But this man, he removed everything that he needed to, and what little he was holding on to of that unbelief, he asked God. He asked God to intercede on his behalf to remove that unbelief. And of course, as we see, the demons were cast out, and Jesus adds the clause, don't ever let him come back into that boy again. And later on, the disciples asked, why couldn't we do this? And Jesus says, only by prayer and fasting are you able to cast these things out. There's no accident, my brothers and sisters, that during our journey to Pascha, during our journey to Holy Week, that we have these days where we dedicate our time to prayer and fasting. Prayer is us going to God and asking God to help us with our unbelief. Prayer is mingling with the Holy Spirit within us and asking God, strengthen me, guide me, help me. And fasting is to rear in and rein in the passions that we have in our lives. Every one of us have them. Every one of us have something that we just struggle with. And as we progress up the steps, right? As we progress up the places that we need to go, if you look at that icon that I passed around, you see that the ladder, right, is going all the way up to heaven. And on the one side, you have the angels, right? You have angels cheering you on. You have the angels that are there guiding you and helping you. And on the underside, you have the dragon waiting underneath, right? You have the dragon and the demons attempting to pull you down. You have both sides pulling at you. But our task is to continue to be strong enough. Because as we're going up that ladder of divine ascent, if you look on that icon very closely, nobody's going up that ladder by themselves. If we're married, we're going up with the spouse. If we have children, we're going up with our children. Of course, sometimes our spouses are not the same place we are. And if we're doing the right job as a husband, we're actually behind our spouses, pushing them a little bit farther, a little bit faster. But that requires us to take a little bit more brunt of what's going on in the world. And of course, if our spouse doesn't want to listen, sometimes we pass them up. Sometimes if our children don't want to listen, sometimes we pass them up. All of us must take that ladder to divine ascent. All of us must go and work our way towards Christ. Every one of us must challenge ourselves. The thing about sin is, the thing about the things that torment is, all of us that live down here in Florida are familiar with the kudzu plant, right? The kudzu vine, right? Little seed, right? That vine starts to grow, but as soon as some water happens, as soon as the rains happen, those vines grow so thick and so massively that it consumes every single thing in its way. And as a matter of fact, sometimes it actually kills whenever it's consuming along the way. That's how sin is, brothers and sisters. That's how sin is if we leave it unchecked, that it will consume us. We must go to God and we must ask God, help me with my unbelief. I believe that you can deliver me from these things, but I really need help with my unbelief. I really need you to strengthen me along the way. And it's important that sometimes we see the most coldest thing in the world, right? The ladder. But as soon as we start getting closer and closer to it, we can start to see that the veil is lifted, that the shadow is lifted, and we see the light burning within. And we start to take those first steps. Don't ever look back. When you start going towards Christ, don't ever look back. Don't ever turn back for anyone or anything in this world. That includes our spouses, our children, our families, our friends, our country. Doesn't matter who it is. Our journey to Christ is ours. Our journey to Christ is something that we will be standing before Him alone. On the day of judgment, no one's going to be standing next to us. We're going to be sitting before the throne of God. Once you start on that ladder of divine ascent, keep going. And as you encounter opposition along the way, You got to ask God to cut those vines away, the kudzu plant. You got to ask God to knock those demons away, and ask God to keep all those things that will bind you here onto this earth, to give you the strength to keep ascending. Whatever it is, like that Greek doctor once said, right? All those centuries ago, if it's ailing you, cut it out of your life. Cut it out of your life. If it's anger, get rid of it. If it's gluttony, get rid of it. If it's lust, get rid of it. Whatever it is, nothing is worth your soul. So today, my brothers and sisters, I hope that you make the choice to take that one step, if you're not there already, to take that next step, to go towards that ladder, to go and make the decision to start that ascent to God, to start that ascent to the salvation that's there for you to take a hold of. It's a gift. It's not like you have to die for it. Jesus already did it. Jesus already did the unimaginable when God the Father sent his only begotten Son to take the place of all of us, to curb the wrath of God, and to forgive us of all the things that we've already done. It's ours to take it. Just take the first step and ask for the mercy. And remember, I believe, Lord, help me with my unbelief.